Snow fell in thick curtains. Blue and red lights flashing across the wet tarmac. Callum Harris knelt on the freezing ground, wrists cuffed tight behind his back, while Millie clung to his coat, sobbing her heart out. PC Natalie Brooks had been called to a report of some bloke causing a scene, so her voice came out sharp as a knife. Callum just shook his head, trying to catch his daughter's eye, when Natalie rolled up his sleeve for a quick pat-down. The fabric slid back and a stark black tattoo appeared. She froze. The night had started ordinary enough. Callum had collected Millie late from after-school club again, his shift at Riverside Retail Park running well past 9. At 36 he looked a good 10 years older. Exhaustion etched deep around his eyes. His maintenance overalls were covered in oil stains that never quite came out. And his hands were rough from years of night shifts fixing boilers and electrics in the city centre complex. Their flat waited on the second floor of a block that had seen better days. Inside, the furniture sagged but everything was neatly arranged. Millie's schoolwork sat in tidy piles on the kitchen table. A single framed photo on the shelf, angled just out of easy sight. Callum kept the place spotless. Kept it safe. Kept it quiet. That was all that mattered now. Millie had been nattering on about her maths test in the car, waving a sheet with a bright red 94. Her excitement lit up the battered old Astra like sunshine. Callum had grinned, properly grinned, and squeezed her hand at the lights. They needed milk and pot noodles. So he pulled into the car park of the local spa, the neon sign buzzing in the cold. Inside the corner shop, the warmth and bright lights felt safe for a moment. Millie picked her favorite pot noodle, while Callum grabbed a 4-pint of milk and some cereal bars. The young lass on the till, Jazz Reed, smiled at Millie, and said how ace her unicorn backpack was. Simple. Normal. The sort of evening that made Callum think they might actually be alright. But outside by the cash point, trouble was brewing. Darren Lawson stood too close to an old deer, his voice getting louder, sharper. Ethel Monroe, 6-7, clutched her handbag with both hands, shoulders hunched. Darren's clean jacket and neat hair made him look respectable to passers-by. But his eyes were cold. He was demanding summit, words coming fast and nasty. Callum spotted it through the window as he paid. His body went still, that old instinct kicking in before his brain caught up. He handed Millie the carrier bag, and told her to wait inside near Jazz. Millie's eyes went wide, but she nodded, sensing the change in his voice. Outside, the December chill bit at Callum's face. He walked over calm, hands where they could be seen, voice steady. Darren had switched from Ethel to Jazz now. She'd stepped out for a quick break. He was right in her face, accusing her of taking the piss, of refusing his card on purpose, of thinking she was better than him. Jazz backed against the brick wall, breathing quick. Callum stepped between them. Not aggressive, just there. His voice came out low but firm. Enough, mate. Police are on their way. Walk away. Darren's face changed in an instant. The rage vanished, replaced by something sly. He clocked Callum's worn coat, his tired face, the carrier bag visible through the window with a 7-year-old holding it. And Darren smirked. He stumbled back on purpose, clumsy-like, arm sweeping across a stack of energy drinks by the door. Cans clattered everywhere. Darren's voice went up now, performing for the handful of people in the car park. This fella attacked me. He threatened me. Look at him. Darren pointed at Callum with fake shock, other hand on his chest like he'd been stabbed. Jazz tried to speak, but Darren shouted over her. I was just standing here and he came at me. Someone had already called the police. A few phones were out recording, but they'd started after the cans fell, only catching Callum standing there while Darren pointed and yelled. When Callum took one step forward to calm things, Darren grabbed his own wrist and hissed in fake pain. The act was spot on. Inside the shop, Millie pressed against the glass, tiny hands fogging it up. Natalie arrived 6 minutes later. Patrol car sliding to a stop near the entrance. At 29 she'd built her career on being sharp and by the book. Hair tied back tight. Uniform pressed. Face blank. The job still had lads who thought women shouldn't be in response cars. She earned respect by being better prepared, quicker, and never bending rules. The scene looked straightforward. Smartly dressed bloke with a scratch on his arm. Breathing heavy. Surrounded by spilled cans. Rough-looking maintenance bloke standing close. Clothes knackered from too many shifts. Little girl crying inside. Witnesses filming. Darren played it perfectly. Officer, thank God you're here. This bloke attacked me. Dunno if he's pissed or what. But he just came at me. I was bricking it for that little girl. What if he does summit? His voice shook just right. Scared, but concerned for Millie, like a decent bloke. Natalie looked at Callum. He stood dead still. Hands by his sides. Not arguing. Eyes flicking to Millie, then back to her. That quietness, that stillness. It looked like guilt to someone trained to read people in scraps. Natalie decided quick. Sir, turn around and put your hands on the car. Callum's jaw clenched. Please. Not in front of my daughter. I didn't do out. Voice low, steady. But something old and hurt flashed in his eyes. Natalie had heard sob stories 1,000 times. She'd learned not to buy them. Sir. Turn around. Now. When Callum hesitated, still looking at Millie through the window, Natalie stepped in and guided him to the car. Callum didn't fight. But every bit of him screamed defeat. The cuffs clicked on. Cold metal on skin. Inside the shop, Millie's scream cut through. Daddy. She bolted out, unicorn backpack bouncing. Tears streaming. No. Don't hurt my daddy. He didn't do anything. A bystander caught her gently. Millie fought, shaking with sobs. Natalie felt a twist in her gut. But pushed it down. Procedure first. Secure the scene. Statements later. Sought truth from acting back at the nick. Then came the moment that changed it all. Natalie did a quick search for anything dangerous. Standard. Jacket pockets, waistband. When she lifted his right arm, the sleeve rode up past the elbow. The tattoo was there. Black ink on skin, small shield, number 17 inside. And below in sharp capitals, hold fast. Natalie's hands stopped. Breath caught. The car park seemed to tilt. Sound faded to just blood rushing in her ears. She knew that tattoo. Seen it once, years back, in a photo her dad kept in his desk. Group of blokes, faces half in shadow. One arm clear in frame. Same shield. Same number. Same words. Her dad's voice came back. Night she was 14, scared of the dark. If you ever meet someone with this mark, Natalie, remember they walked through hell to pull folk into the light. They held fast when everything went to pieces. Her dad had touched the photo gently. His own hands scarred from the job. These lads, he'd said quietly, saved lives when no one else could. Callum felt her freeze on his arm. He turned his head a fraction. Saw her face drain white. Without a word he twisted and pulled the sleeve down. Even cuffed. Instinct, keeping hidden. Darren saw it too. Saw her falter. His smirk faded a touch. Calculation taking over. Natalie forced her breathing steady. She had a job. Scene to process. Couldn't stand frozen over a tattoo that might mean nout. Might be coincidence. But when she spoke to Callum again, her voice had changed. We need to go to the station for statements. Tone softer. She turned to Millie, sobbing in Jazz's arms. Now then, love, your dad's going to be all right. We just need to sort a few things. I promise. Millie's face crumpled worse. Not believing a word. Natalie felt that look like a slap. Back at the nick, fluorescents buzzed overhead. Callum sat in an interview room. Still cuffed, still silent. Inspector Rob Whitman skimmed the report. Impatient. Open and shut, Brooks. Multiple witnesses say this lad went for Lawson. We've got video of the aftermath. Process him, let the CPS sort it tomorrow. But Natalie couldn't drop it. Sir, I'd like to check all the shop footage. Talk to witnesses one by one. Whitman's face hardened. You questioning the victim's statement, Constable? Natalie chose words careful. Whitman stared, then waved her off. Be quick. Wrapped by 3. Natalie found Millie in the break room, curled up with her backpack. A WPC watching her. She'd stopped crying, but looked tiny. Natalie got her hot chocolate from the machine, knelt down. Millie wouldn't look at first, but took the cup, hands freezing. Your dad's going to be okay, Natalie said soft. I'm going to make sure we get the full story. Millie looked up finally, eyes red. You said you protect good people. Voice small, broken. Why are you doing this to my daddy? Hit harder than any adult accusation. Natalie had no decent answer. She went back to her desk and started pulling the footage. The spa had 3 cameras. One on the till, one at the front door, one pointed at the cash point. She watched from 30 minutes before the incident. Darren approaching Ethel by the cash point. The old lady stepped back twice, clearly uncomfortable. Darren's body language aggressive, invasive. Then Jazz stepped out for her break. And Darren turned on her straight away. The inside camera showed Callum paying, Millie beside him. He glanced out, saw Darren in Jazz's face. And his whole posture changed. Not aggressive, but alert. He spoke to Millie, handed her the bag, walked out. The camera didn't catch the next bit clearly, but the timestamp showed Callum only grabbed Darren's wrist once, to stop him lunging at Jazz. Natalie called Jazz in. The lass arrived at 11:30, still in her work polo, knackered but determined. She told it straight. Darren had been hassling Ethel for money, saying the machine ate his card. When Jazz went out for air, Darren got right in her face, accusing her of disrespecting him when she just processed his declined card. Callum had stepped in calm, stood between them, never raised his voice. Darren had knocked the drinks over on purpose to make it look like a fight. Ethel confirmed the same when Natalie rang her. That nice young man protected me, the old lady said, voice shaking. That other one was after my purse. I know a bully when I see one. Natalie reread Darren's statement. He said Callum wore a black jacket. Footage showed dark blue. Said Millie was outside during it all. She'd been inside until after Natalie arrived. Small lies, but lies. Darren's performance had been so good the cracks only showed under close look. When Natalie took the discrepancies to Whitman, he wasn't pleased. Brooks, you're making a mountain out of a molehill. A few details off. The bloke was traumatized. Memory gets fuzzy. Natalie pressed gently. Sir, the witnesses contradict his whole account. Whitman's phone buzzed. He glanced, then looked at her harder. Drop it, Brooks. File the report and move on. Something in his tone set her instincts off. She'd worked under him 3 years. Demanding, sometimes harsh, but never illogical. This wasn't about procedure anymore. It was about control. She nodded slowly, but didn't drop it. She went to the interview room. Callum sat uncuffed now, but guarded. Natalie sent the officer away and sat opposite. Callum looked up, face blank. The tattoo on your arm, she said quietly. Operation Hold Fast. What does it mean? Callum's expression stayed the same, but his hands tightened on the table. Old life doesn't matter now. Natalie leaned in. It matters to me. My dad had a photograph. Men with that same tattoo. He said they saved his life once. Callum's jaw worked silently. He looked at her a long time. Something ancient and tired moved in his eyes. He should have told you to forget you ever saw it. Why? Natalie asked. Callum's voice dropped lower. Because the people we fought against, some of them were inside the system. And when you stand up to power, power pushes back. It doesn't stop pushing. My wife died in a car crash 3 years ago. Brake lines cut. Couldn't prove it. Couldn't fight it without making Millie a target. So I disappeared. Took a job nobody notices. Kept my head down. Kept my daughter safe. That tattoo is a death sentence if the wrong person sees it. Natalie felt ice in her chest. Her own dad had died in a car crash 5 years ago. Right after he testified about irregularities in a big case. Official report said mechanical failure. But her dad was meticulous about the car. Paranoid about safety. Who would want to hurt you now? She asked. Callum shook his head. Dunno if it's about me anymore. Or if Darren stumbled into it by accident. But when your inspector looked at my file, something changed in his face. He made a phone call. Then suddenly this whole thing got urgent. Natalie's throat went dry. She left the room. Whitman was in his office, door shut. On his mobile, low voice. She couldn't hear words, but saw his face through the glass. Concerned, maybe scared. When he hung up and saw her watching, his expression smoothed to neutral. Natalie made a choice that could end her career. She stepped into the ladies, pulled out her personal phone, rang a number she'd saved years ago. Detective Chief Inspector Rachel Kahn from the National Crime Agency. Had worked with her dad once. Natalie explained fast, efficient, missing nothing. The tattoo, witnesses, Darren's lies, Whitman's reaction, Callum's history. Rachel listened silent. Then spoke. Operation Hold Fast was real. Classified off-book unit. Pulled witnesses and assets out of hostile situations. They disappeared people who knew too much about organized crime, corrupt officials. Operation shut down 8 years ago after several team members died in suspicious circumstances. If your man's really one of them, he's been living on borrowed time. And if your inspector is involved in shutting this down, we need to move careful. They made a plan. Rachel would send a team, but it would take hours. Meanwhile, Natalie had to keep Callum and Millie safe. And gather enough to trap Darren into confessing. NCA couldn't move without solid proof that would stand up in court. Natalie arranged for Millie to stay with Jazz temporarily. Official emergency placement. When she explained to Millie, the little girl's face crumpled again. I want my daddy. Natalie knelt, took Millie's small hands. I know, sweetheart, and I'm going to make this right. I promise you. Your dad's a good man, and I'm going to prove it. Millie studied her face, searching. You really promise? Something in her voice reached through the fear. Millie finally nodded. Processing Callum's release took another hour. Whitman tried to block it, citing evidence concerns. But Natalie pulled procedure rank. No formal charges, they couldn't hold him. When Callum walked out into the cold night, Natalie waited by her own car. Get in, she said. We need to talk somewhere safe. They drove to a greasy spoon on the edge of town. Nearly empty at 2 a.m. In a corner booth over tea neither drank. Callum told the real story. Operation Hold Fast had been his life for 6 years. He specialized in tactical extractions. Getting people out when regular police couldn't reach. Mob trial witnesses, blown undercover agents. Once a prosecutor and his family when a cartel put a price on them. His team moved fast, moved quiet, left no trace. But on their last job 8 years ago, it all went wrong. Extracting a federal witness with evidence of a conspiracy. Police officials, counselors, organized crime across 3 forces. The intel was compromised. They walked into an ambush. 3 men died that night. Callum survived with a bullet scar under his ribs. And the knowledge someone high up had sold them out. The investigation was buried. Classified. Sealed. Callum tried to chase it. But every door slammed shut. Then his wife started getting followed. Strange cars outside the house. Anonymous threats. When she died in that crash, Callum knew. Couldn't prove it. Couldn't fight without proof. So he took Millie and vanished into a life where nobody looks twice. Night shift maintenance, cheap flat, no mates, no profile. No trace of the man he used to be. The tattoo was his one mistake. Done with the team after their first big success. Young, daft, thinking they were invincible. Now it was a beacon for anyone who knew what to look for. Natalie took it all in, tea going cold. My dad was Army intelligence, attached as liaison. Good man. Tried to push the investigation after the ambush. Heard he died a few years later. I'm sorry. They sat quiet a moment. Then Natalie said, Darren isn't random. Someone sent him to provoke you. Get you into the system where they could silence you. Or find out if you still have evidence. Callum's face was grim. I don't have evidence. Never did. Just suspicions. But they don't know that. Here's what we're going to do, Natalie said. She laid out the NCA plan. They needed Darren to implicate himself and whoever sent him. That meant a trap. Callum would play along, act willing to deal. Plead guilty to something minor to keep Millie safe. Darren would have to coordinate with his handler. They'd catch it all on wire. It was dangerous. If Darren or Whitman suspected, they'd vanish and Callum would carry the can. But it was the only way. Callum looked at her a long time. Why are you doing this? You could walk away. Protect your career. Natalie met his eyes. I watched you get cuffed in front of your daughter. For trying to protect people. If I don't fix this, I don't deserve to wear this uniform. The trap was set for the next evening. Natalie, wired up by Rachel's team, arranged to meet Darren in the multi-story car park of an empty office block. She told him Callum was willing to make a deal. Plead to disturbing the peace, pay a fine, anything to keep Millie out of care. But he needed assurance it would end there. Darren arrived 20 minutes late, too cocky. Leaned against a concrete pillar and grinned. So the tough guy breaks, eh? Knew he would. Nobody risks their kid. Natalie kept her face neutral. He just wants this over. Darren's grin widened. Sure he does. But here's the thing, love. This doesn't end until we know he's not going to cause problems later. We need insurance. Who's we? Natalie asked carefully. Darren waved a hand. People who keep the city running smooth. People who don't like loose ends from old jobs coming back to bite them. He didn't say hold fast outright. But the meaning was clear. The wire caught every word. Darren kept talking, arrogant now, thinking he'd won. Your inspector knows how to play ball. Been on the payroll for years. Kept things quiet. Made sure the right cases disappeared. He's the one who told us about Harris. Saw that tattoo in the system. Made a call. We took care of it. He leaned in, voice dropping. The guy should have stayed invisible. His missus should have kept her gob shut. These things happen when people don't cooperate. Natalie's hand clenched around her phone in her pocket. The signal to the NCA team listening nearby. She kept her face calm. So what now? Darren shrugged. Harris takes the plea, keeps his head down. Maybe we let him live quiet. Or he makes noise and that pretty little girl ends up in care. Or worse. Simple maths. That's when Callum stepped out from behind a van. NCA officers with him, vests clear. Darren's face went white. The setup crashed down. DCI Khan stepped forward, already cautioning him. Everything he'd said recorded, transmitted, documented. Darren tried to bolt. Made 3 steps before officers had him on the ground. His phone seized. Within minutes forensics pulling messages, call logs, contacts. Everything to trace the network up the chain. At the station, Inspector Whitman was working late. When NCA officers walked in, he saw them coming, hand moving toward his drawer. DCI Khan's voice cut through. They'd found emails on his personal computer. Burner phones in his car. Years of payments through shell accounts. He'd been the leak 8 years ago. The one keeping tabs on surviving hold-fast members. Making sure they stayed buried or ended up dead. The arrest was quick, efficient. Whitman said nothing, asked for his solicitor. But his face showed everything. Rage, fear, the collapse of years of lies. As they led him out in cuffs, He looked at Natalie with pure hatred. You just destroyed yourself, Brooks. Natalie met his eyes steady. No, sir. I just remembered what the badge is supposed to mean. Paperwork took 2 days. Crown prosecution moved fast with the evidence. Darren flipped immediately, naming names, giving up contacts for a reduced sentence. The conspiracy went deeper than anyone expected. Counselors, a police superintendent, links to organized crime going back decades. Operation Hold Fast had been shut down because it got too close to too many powerful people. Callum's record was wiped clean. Formal exoneration, public apology from the force. The CPS offered compensation, counseling, whatever he needed. Callum took it quietly, focus only on Millie. When they were finally reunited, Millie ran so hard she nearly knocked him over. Callum caught her, lifted her up, held her so tight his arms shook. Daddy, she sobbed into his shoulder. I knew you didn't do anything bad. I knew it. Callum closed his eyes, breathed in her hair, let himself feel safe for the first time in years. Natalie came to see them a week later, back in their small flat, but it felt different. Lighter somehow. Millie was coloring at the kitchen table when Natalie knocked. The little girl looked up, hesitated, then slowly put down her crayon. Natalie knelt to her level. I owe you an apology, she said softly. I was supposed to protect you and your dad. And instead I scared you. I'm so sorry. Millie's lip trembled. You hurt my daddy. Natalie nodded. I did, and that was wrong. I should have listened better. I should have looked harder for the truth. I made a mistake and you both paid for it. Millie was quiet a long moment. Then, my daddy says everybody makes mistakes. But good people fix them. Natalie felt her throat tighten. He's right. And I'm trying to fix mine. Is that okay? Millie thought, face serious. Then nodded. Okay. Callum stood in the doorway watching. When Millie went back to coloring, he and Natalie stepped into the hall. Callum spoke first. Thank you for believing me when you didn't have to. For risking everything. Natalie shook her head. I didn't do anything heroic. I just did my job. Finally. But there was something else she needed to say. My dad, she began, then stopped. Started again. He talked about you, not by name. But about the men who went into hell to bring people out. Said they were the bravest people he ever knew. Callum's expression softened just a fraction. Your dad was brave too. He stood up when it mattered. That cost him everything. They stood quiet in the hallway. Both carrying the weight of people they'd loved and lost. Both choosing to keep going anyway. Then Natalie said. There's a position coming up, Community Safety Coordinator. Part-time civilian role. Works with at-risk families. Helps them get resources, safety plans. The force wants to rebuild trust. They thought someone like you. Someone who knows what it's like to fall through the cracks. Might be good at it. Callum looked surprised. That's not exactly my background. Natalie smiled faintly. Your background is protecting people when systems fail. That's exactly what this needs. He considered, then nodded slowly. I'll think about it. Natalie was reinstated with full honors. The force, desperate to rebuild its image after Whitman's arrest, praised her courage and integrity. She accepted the commendations quietly. But privately she knew the truth. She'd almost been part of the problem. Almost let procedure blind her to justice. A lesson she'd carry forever. 3 months later, on a cold evening. City lights reflecting off fresh snow. Callum walked Millie home from her new school. She'd moved to a better catchment. One of the small Merces from the settlement. Millie chatted about her day. New friend Sophia. Art project starting next week. They passed the park where Christmas lights twinkled in the trees. Families round the temporary ice rink. Laughter carrying on the crisp air. Millie tugged his hand. Can we watch for a minute, Daddy? Callum nodded. They stood at the fence together. Natalie found them there, off duty. Civilian coat instead of uniform. She'd got into the habit of checking in. Not as a copper anymore, but as someone who owed them more than she could repay. Millie saw her first and waved. Officer Natalie, then corrected with a gappy grin. "I mean, Miss Natalie." She ran over and hugged Natalie's legs tight. Natalie's eyes went bright as she hugged back. Callum joined them, moving slower. Still cautious, but no longer hunted. They stood together, watching the skaters. 3 people bound by trauma and healing. By mistakes and redemption. Millie looked up at Natalie. "Are you going to keep protecting people?" Natalie nodded. "Always. That's my promise." Millie seemed satisfied. "Good, 'cause my daddy's really good at protecting people too. Maybe you can be a team." Natalie met Callum's eyes over Millie's head. Understanding there. Respect. The beginning of something that might one day be trust. Not romance, not Hollywood healing. But something deeper, more real. 2 people who'd seen the worst of systems. And still chosen to believe in redemption. As they walked through the park, Millie between them holding both hands, the city lights glittered like promises. The world was still complicated, still broken in 1,000 ways. But tonight, in this moment, justice had won. A good man stood free. A little girl felt safe again. An officer remembered why she took the oath. Millie started humming a song from music class. Slightly off-key, full of joy. Callum squeezed her hand and smiled down. The weight he'd carried so long finally easing. Natalie walked beside them. Badge in her pocket, not on her chest. But feeling more like a protector than ever before. Snow began to fall again. Soft and gentle. Covering the city in white, fresh, clean. A chance to begin again. As they passed under a street lamp, Callum's sleeve rode up just a bit. The tattoo visible for a moment in the light. Hold fast. He had held fast through darkness. Held fast through loss. Held fast for his daughter when everything else fell away. And now, finally, he could hold fast to something new. Hope. Behind them the park lights twinkled on. Families laughed. Children played. The city breathed. Life went on as it always does. But sometimes with a little more justice than before. Sometimes with proof that one person choosing courage over convenience could change everything. Sometimes with the knowledge that redemption isn't a miracle. It's a choice. A hard choice. A brave choice. But a choice nonetheless. Millie looked up at her dad, then at Natalie. "I'm glad you didn't give up on us," she said simply. Natalie knelt one more time, eye level with the little girl, who'd asked her the hardest question she'd ever faced. "I'm glad I didn't either, sweetheart. You taught me something important." Millie tilted her head. "What?" Natalie smiled. "That being brave sometimes means admitting when you're wrong. And that fixing mistakes matters more than never making them." Millie nodded solemnly, as if it made perfect sense. Then her face brightened. "Want to come get hot chocolate with us? They have marshmallows." Callum looked at Natalie, leaving it to her. Natalie stood slowly, brushed snow from her knees. And nodded. "I'd like that." They walked on together through the winter evening. 3 souls bound by the hardest kind of redemption. The kind earned through truth, through pain. Through the courage to choose what was right when easy beckoned. The kind that left scars, but also left strength. The kind that reminded everyone watching that heroes aren't people who never fall. They're people who get back up. People who hold fast when the world tells them to let go. People who choose love over fear. Justice over convenience. Hope over despair. And in the warm glow of a cafe window. Over hot chocolate with extra marshmallows. A little girl smiled at her father. And at the woman who had saved them both. By saving herself first. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The world would still be complicated. But tonight, they had this. They had each other. They had proof that good could still win. That was enough. That was everything. That was the promise worth fighting for.